Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kayla Rogers, and I'm the program supervisor for the Women's Fund for Health, Education, and Resiliency. For those of you with, we're going to just start over real quick. We're having some technical difficulties. Okay. I think it's just this way, right? No, it doesn't. Oh, okay. Oh, because you're, there we go. Okay, sorry about that, everyone. We figured it out. So again, thank you for joining us and thank you for your patience. My name is Kayla Rogers and I'm the program supervisor for the Women's Fund for Health, Education, and Resiliency. If you haven't joined any of our presentations before or you're not very familiar with our organization, our mission is to provide women and adolescent girls with the tools they need to be advocates for their health. So we do this through presentations like the one we're having today, as well as curriculum-based classes and publications. Our services are free of charge. And if you're ever interested in learning more about the Women's Fund, you can visit our website, thewomensfund.org. I will also have our social media handles at the end of today's presentation. So we are very grateful today to have Caroline Pacisis back with us. She did our last presentation in June, and today she will be speaking to us over work-life balance in a hybrid world. So we're very excited to get started with that. But before I turn the floor over, I'm going to do a brief introduction. So Caroline is a certified physician assistant in the internal medicine department at Kelsey-Seybold River Oaks Medical and Diagnostic Center. She received her Bachelor of Science in Nutrition at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa in 2016, and her Master of Physician Assistant Studies in 2019 at Bethel University in Paris, Tennessee. Following graduation, she cared for patients as a family medicine physician assistant at Texas Health Physicians Group, Texas Health Family Care in Willow Park. She joined Kelsey-Seybold Internal Medicine Department in 2021. She's a member of the American Academy of Physician Assistants, Texas Academy of Physician Assistants, and the Texas Gulf Coast Physician Assistant Association. She enjoys practicing yoga, going for walks outdoors, spending time with family and friends, and gardening. So we are so grateful to have you back today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over.
Okay, hello. Thank you so much, Kayla, for that introduction. I'm so grateful to be here talking with the Women's Fund. So we'll get started. Like she said, my name is Caroline, physician assistant. And so we're here today to talk about work-life balance, specifically in a hybrid world. So we'll get started here. Hybrid world, how did we get here? Let's talk about how the pandemic affected this hybrid world. If you remember the Industrial Revolution, how that reshaped how people work, and that changed a lot in the world on how people went to work, how people lived outside of work. And so similarly, the COVID pandemic has changed the world and how we both work and live in the same kind of way. So let's kind of start by talking about what life was before the pandemic and as far as work life. So for decades, most work environments had a designated workspace. So you went to an office when you went to work, or a location outside of your home that you shared with other people that worked for the same company. Now, pre-pandemic, there was a slow increase in hybrid or more virtual or remote work. This wasn't a brand new thing at all, but it was more of a slower progression. And a lot of people had never worked from home before. Just a couple numbers here. Zoom was developed in 2013, and then Microsoft Teams was 2017, which is surprising to me. That's really only a few years ago, and that's such a commonly, I think most people would at least know what Microsoft Teams was, if not used it sometimes or even regularly. And we didn't know what social distancing was prior to the pandemic. That wasn't a term that we used in any scenario. But then in 2019, I think this is important to note, the average commute in the US one way was 27.5 minutes. So about 25 to 30 minute one way. That's about an hour a day for most people, which is at least 5 hours a week. Over a year, over a lifetime, that is a huge chunk of your life. And so I think it's interesting how much just that alone, just the commute alone, if that has changed for some people, that's a huge change in their life. So let's talk, there's people that work in the office and how their life has changed, and then people that didn't work in more of an office setting, who had service work, production, things like that. So let's first talk about how office workers, how this has changed. Typically, your home is where you go after work or before work to relax. There's separation. Now, when you're bringing your work to your home, depending on your space, you may have had an extra room or an office that you could create to be your workspace. But if you didn't, you may use your dining room, which then you're overlapping your meal time with your family where you work. Or if you don't have a dining room table, you may be using your couch or your bedroom, various things. So there's blurred lines there. Work hours that were used to be more defined now are becoming fuzzier because you are working from home. You're not having a commute. You're not, expected to see everybody in the office at 8 a.m. or whatever it may be. You may be purchasing new supplies to create the workspace, whether that be provided by your office or for your own self to help create a workspace. That was a new thing for everybody to whether purchase or have their company purchase supplies that they need to work from home. So this is a huge change for office workers in a lot of ways. Now let's talk about how it's changed for service workers. So service, manufacturing, manual labor, those types of people, although the environment, the actual physical location may have been the same, they still went to work. There's a lot of differences because now they are doing masking and sanitation. Healthcare workers may have been more familiar with that type of things, but those that didn't work in healthcare didn't know, what PPE was, or, maybe you're new to the sanitizing guidelines. And so there was that new change. Commute stayed the same, maybe a little bit less traffic. But then there's the pressure to keep going to work, even if it means possible exposure, because you were around people, and then just not having the flexibility that those office workers had. So if you were a service worker and you had children that no longer were going to school, you had to kind of work that way of how are you going to have your kids at home while you have to go in the office. So different challenges for office workers and service workers, but both big changes in the last couple of years. So now let's talk about, now we've talked about, what changed now, what's this new normal? There's pros and cons to this new hybrid world and more remote working. Some cons is that we are super connected to one another at all times. So now that you're using your home space and probably your personal cell phone and your maybe even personal laptop to work, it's hard not to be expected to see a new email or a new call on your personal phone, even if it's work related. So there's just a lot of hyper connection in that way. We're expected to kind of almost always be on call, at least for some people. And then the communication between one another is changed. You don't walk by your colleague to get coffee or water, even those micro moments. Being around someone in person does make a difference, whether it's good or bad. Maybe virtual, you have more time to catch up with one another. There can be pros there, but it's just a different form of communication. And we are human, and human interaction is important and does make an impact. So there's more connection, but there's also some less connection when we're talking about working from home, virtual. Okay. And then the structure, the infrastructure of office space. Now that a lot of companies feel a little bit more comfortable having their employees around one another. Now they're questioning, even if they can, should they keep their office space? Should they not re-sign the lease, or should they sell it and allow their workers to work remotely rather than, they're asking, is it worth it to rent a space or to own a space? And so now big headquarters are moving, and this could change a lot of the just ways big cities work. And then management, it makes things a little bit more blurry. Who is the manager? Whose office do you walk into to ask a question if you're not in the office anymore? It's a phone call. And so there's a lot of trends in that way, just the physical environment. Now we have the option more so, but different companies are having different views on that. And now let's talk about labor shortage because of everything that has gone on. There are many reasons for the labor shortage that we're going through right now. Number one, I think people had more time to think about the value of their job, and a lot of people have asked for more money for the same responsibility. People are also, again, reflecting and thinking, is what they're doing worth it? There was a study by Indeed saying that 92% of people in the pandemic said that they felt their life was too short to stay in the job that they were not passionate about. And I think this comes from just a lot of time that people had to reflect. And then with the flexibility that has been offered by some companies for remote or in office, other company employees are expecting that flexibility, even if it wasn't previously offered, or they wanted to switch back to work. People are expecting more flexibility now. And then childcare. If we have a shortage of labor, then we have a shortage of childcare workers. Therefore, the people who are looking to go back to labor can't go back because they don't have childcare. So it's kind of just a domino effect. And then there's the vaccine hesitancy, some companies requiring it, some not requiring it, and that can impact whether a person goes back to work or able to go to work, or which company that person chooses. And there's also been some studies that have shown more people have retired and retired early. So 5 million missing workers have been reported by Goldman Sachs. 2.5 of those are retired, and half of that 2.5 retired early. So that's a lot of people who could have kept working, whether it be 1 year or 10 years, they retired early in these last couple of years. Immigration, depending on the rate of immigration, it's suspected that the more immigration we have, the more improvement we'll have in our labor shortage, and the less immigration we have, the more labor shortage we'll have. And then 48% of job seekers per flex job said that they're not finding the right positions for their skills. So there's a little bit of disconnect of the demand of jobs and the people that have the skills to set that job, or there's people with all these skills, but there's not a job for them. So there's a little disconnect there that's contributing to this labor shortage. And then people are just burnt out. A lot of people, there's an anti-work movement. People are considering a work-free life, or even considering being their own boss. 2021, there was a US research and showed that there is the most, be your own boss type of jobs that they've ever had. And a lot of those, it's been shown, are parents. And so I think that just shows, people get back to the childcare issue. People are just having to brainstorm and figure out a way to be a parent in this new hybrid world. And then there's an issue with a lot of automated hiring. We have such great opportunities through the internet to get hired, but there's cons to that too. If your resume shows that you haven't worked for 6 or more months, it may automatically beat you out of that opportunity before a person even gets to evaluate if you were a candidate. So now let's talk about the work-life balance itself. What is work-life balance? This is very complex. It always has been, but even more so now. And it's about feeling like you have what you want, fulfillment out of your job, as well as fulfillment out of your personal life. So some have said there's 7 slices of life: family, profession, personal life, your physical life, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. So there's a lot going on just in that, and your work-life balance can affect all of these things. So let's talk about 14 steps to help achieve work-life balance in this current world. Okay, and these all kind of work with one another. All of these steps work with one another. So number 1, set priorities. And a lot of these steps involve just reflecting on what do you want, what's important, what are your goals. So number 1, set priorities. What do you think you need to focus on today, or in the next week, or the next month? And then in the sense of reflecting, take a week and kind of document or jot down, what are you spending your time in? What are you spending the most time in? What are you spending the least time in? And you can find out, and then you go back and you look at your priorities and see if those align. If you notice you're spending a long time on this when really that wasn't the most important thing for your day, whether it be for work or for life, what can you do to tweak that? And this goes for your work and your personal life. And then concentrating on one thing at a time. This is hard. This is challenging. But someone I know who's very successful and deals with a high stress environment says that they focus on whatever is the top priority in that moment. And the minute another, there may be a list of 10 things that are high priority, but you focus on whatever is the most important. And then the second another thing on that list becomes more important, you jump to that. And then the second, the other thing comes more important, you jump to that. And you have to keep evaluating what's the most important thing I need to be doing right now. And then you just focus on that. And that's really the best way. And it's challenging to do that, but it's really quite efficient. And then schedule one thing for yourself that you look forward to each day, whether that be work related or non-work related. Make sure that you schedule one thing as if you're scheduling a meeting. And then the next step goes off on that to respect that. You wouldn't, if you had a load of laundry that you needed to do, you wouldn't miss an important work meeting for that, even though it's important to do the laundry. So for the same thing, if your scheduled thing for the day is to talk on the phone with a friend, or go for a walk, or spend time with a loved one, or read your favorite book, you shouldn't compromise that for something like doing laundry if that can wait. It's hard. I know there are things in life you have to do, but do try to schedule something every day for yourself and make that a non-negotiable. Review your personal habits and lifestyle. Are there things that you could be doing to feel better and be more productive and focused? Making sure you're sleeping well, making sure you're nourishing your body, and you're exercising regularly. Although you may feel like you don't have time, you're not going to be as productive with both work and non-work related things if you're not taking care of yourself. Next step, take a vacation. If your company offers you vacation time, you should use it. Again, time away will actually probably make you more productive when you come back, when you're rested, you're rejuvenated, you're motivated, all of those things, versus when you're burnt out, you may not be quite as focused. So it really is a win-win for everybody for you to take that vacation time. And then when you feel like you're struggling, ask for support. Most companies have excellent human resources and options, and it's benefits both you and them to ask for help. So when you feel like you're something's not working for you, it doesn't hurt to ask. If you don't feel like you're getting enough from your company's resources, you could hire a personal coach who can get you a little bit, help you if you're struggling to figure out what are my priorities. They can help you with that. They're expert in that, and that's a really great resource just to get a kind of a non-biased opinion outside of your company to help you figure out what is a good next step for you. Setting boundaries. This is so crucial in this hybrid world. Whatever you need to do to say at this time period, from this to this, I'm not going to check my email. And if you need to notify your employer about that, make sure that's okay. But try to set some boundaries for yourself, just like I tell patients with sleep hygiene, when it's time, an hour before bed, shut off your work computer, move your briefcase outside of the bedroom. If you live in a small space, throw a sheet over your briefcase, whatever you need to do to separate yourself and set that boundary. Do that as well with your work, as well as with your life. Sometimes you need to get to work. So you have to set boundaries with your personal life too, when you're working from home. So that really goes both ways. And then finding a mentor, whether it's someone who works in your profession or someone in your personal life who maybe has been through similar struggles. Find someone who you can talk to openly and kind of, again, it's not kind of like a personal coach, but maybe not someone who's working for you, someone that's just helping you on the side, just to get another opinion to kind of look at what you're doing and see if they have any recommendations that could help. And then learn to say no. This goes along with the boundaries. It's hard to say no, especially when you're someone caring, you're hardworking, you care about your family, you care about your work, and you want to succeed, and you want to, maintain financial stability. You want to say yes to things to keep going. But again, sometimes saying no can actually benefit yourself and who you work for. When you set boundaries, therefore you're more rested, you're more motivated. So it really benefits everybody to say no when you feel that you need to. And then just continue reflecting, continue evaluating every week, think about, okay, how did it go last week? Is there anything that I could do better? Is there anything I didn't like on those days where I felt this way? What could I do differently to feel better, to work better, to enjoy my friends and family better? Reflection is so good in so many ways. Jotting down a journal, thinking through things, you can find a lot of solutions that way. Okay, so some unintentional consequence of working from home. Sedentary behavior. So we were talking about exercise. I've seen this a lot with patients, and they can't, it just happened fast. And they went from, even if it's so simple as, they at least walked 3 minutes from their car to their office and had to get up and go till 3 minutes to their car to go to lunch. Those micro moments were lost in a lot of ways for a lot of people. So there's a lot more sedentary behavior. You could work on your laptop from your couch, horizontal, for some people. So this was a big change. And we know there's risk of sedentary behavior. On average, Americans spend 7.7 hours each day sitting or reclining. And that's the definition of sedentary behavior. There's been studies that have shown sedentary behavior or sitting for 8 hours a day has similar risk factors to obesity or smoking. That's huge. I remember I worked with a physician who told me sitting is the new smoking. So this really is an issue that we have to work on. But I think we all need to give ourselves grace because there's been a lot of change in the last few years. But now I think it's time to kind of address it. So too much sitting, how this can affect you. Obesity, you're not burning as many calories, which therefore obesity itself can lead to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, blood clots if you really sit for a very long time. And so trying to get even those micro moments, even if you feel maybe overwhelming to think I've got to move for 60 minutes a day, even, 5 minutes every 2 hours, that kind of thing, just to get out. And it'll actually make you, I think it helps the brain work well too, to stay more focused and take a minute away from the screen. It helps with the eye strain too. I've seen a lot of people complain of eye strain from staring at a screen. So I think this is something that I think would be good for everybody to work on. Is really, it's not about going to the gym and doing 60 minutes on a treadmill. It's micro moments, going for a brisk walk, doing a little stretching in between meetings, things like that. And the good news of working from home is you can do, a downward dog away from your computer versus you couldn't really do that in an office quite as easily. So you can do some more yoga more easily if you're at home between meetings. Okay, and then another unintentional consequence is isolation and loneliness. Even if you do live with other people, I don't think I even realized how much being around other people, not just your loved ones, makes a difference in your life when all of a sudden that is lost. So people who have worked from home, a lot of people have experienced for the first time or first time in a long time, the sensation of loneliness. And loneliness itself has been linked to increased risk of heart disease and increased risk of stroke, 29% increase of heart disease, 32% increased risk of stroke. So that's a physical manifestation of that. And how to break this cycle, even if it's simply a walk around the block and seeing people scheduling phone calls, FaceTimes, again, walks, even if you feel that you need to social distance, Zoom calls. I think there's a lot of avenues, but it takes some work to plan these things to prevent that sensation of loneliness. And that's just going to be a new normal that we're going to have to learn to prioritize that social interaction. So that's all I have as far as the slides. I would love any questions and happy to answer anything that anybody has a question about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. I feel like I heard a similar presentation towards the beginning of the pandemic, and it feels like different now that it's hitting now, but still very, very relevant. So we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for questions. If you would like, you can put your question in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself if you have a question, if that's easier for you. I will kick us off with the first one. So you mentioned burnout. Can you talk a little bit about how someone might recognize that they are experiencing burnout?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that can be hard to recognize, but I think lack of motivation for things you used to enjoy doing. You may be used to get fulfillment out of a certain thing of a job, and all of a sudden you're not as fulfilled from it, or things outside of work, you're not as motivated to do things that you used to enjoy. Maybe being more irritable when that wasn't something you used to ever be. But I think the main thing is the motivation, something you used to be passionate about, or at least, interested in. That lack of motivation or interest, I think, is a huge red flag for burnout. And it doesn't mean that you don't still care. It just means that you're burnt out.
So a lot of the things that you talked about are things that you could do if you're experiencing burnout. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself, scheduling to do things that you enjoy. Are those things that you would also recommend to prevent burnout?
Absolutely. That one, I think that's such a great example of asking yourself, would I skip a work meeting to go do the dishes or clean the laundry or watch an episode of TV, even though that sounds really nice? No, probably not. Then don't skip that thing that feels good, whether it be, going on a walk or talking to a friend on the phone or reading a book, taking a bath, whatever it is that you enjoy. Make that, it's hard, but really try to tell yourself this is a personal meeting. I have a personal meeting with myself every day. That's non-negotiable.
Okay. So you also discussed missing some of those micro moments. If you're working from home, you don't have those smaller interactions throughout the day. So how do you suggest that people who work from home keep that social interaction with their coworkers?
So I think Teams or Skype, or even phone calls, even little emails. You have 10 minutes between a meeting, emailing or Skyping or FaceTiming a coworker and just asking how they're doing might actually make you feel better too. It's a win-win for everybody. And the more you get to know your coworkers, the more you're going to work better together. It's, I think, just whereas previous we didn't have to try. Most people, if they walk by someone while they're getting coffee, they're going to say hi. Whereas now we have to kind of go out of our way a little bit more to do it. But I think once you start doing it, you realize how nice it is. And it's just going to have to be a new thing. We get accustomed to that being part of our normal daily routine. But I do think it's challenging, and think hopefully companies will see that and implement that where the employees don't have to go out of their way so much. It just kind of is part of the routine, is that you're required to check in on this person every day or whatever it may be. So if you're a manager out there, that may be something you consider for your team. Even if it's a 1 minute, you need to text this person and ask them about how their weekend was, or anything like that. Maybe that would be a great thing as a manager to implement.
Yeah. I think whenever we first started working from home, it was really hard because I felt like I constantly had to be productive since I wasn't in the office space. And then you realize, like, if I was at work, I would be having 5-minute conversations with my colleagues that had nothing to do with work, but we're kind of just getting to know each other or catching up. So I think it's good that you mentioned that. Like, it's okay to just check in and not feel like you constantly have to work the whole time.
Yeah, I think people have had a lot of guilt in that way, a guilt for not being as productive as they could be. And I think everybody just needs to give themselves some grace. Changes, even the best change in the world, can be hard. So I think everybody just needs to give themselves a great grace and not feel guilty for if there was a little bit less production than expected during this change time. We'll come out stronger.
Yeah. Do you have any tips for time management? I feel like with this term work-life balance, there's, it's probably really important to kind of manage your time well so that you feel like you have a balance. Do you have any tips for doing that?
I think this is so individualized. Everybody does better different ways. There's so many tools out there. So I would say if there was one thing I would recommend, it would be, and I know I say this all the time, but journaling and reflection, because you got to figure out what works for you. Some people do better, if you need a little timer on your computer or phone, and you get a timer for an hour, and you're not allowed to, look at your personal phone stuff for that hour, or you're not allowed to get up to go to the bathroom unless, it's an emergency, or go get a coffee or whatever it is during that time, or that may work for you. Or some people need the structure of, my lunch is at 12 and I'm going to sit my dad, even if I'm hungry, if you're in the office, you can't take your lunch at, 11, even if you wanted to. So maybe keeping some structure there. There's apps now, like, there's ways to make your phone, you can't access things, or you get alerts on your phone if you're, your time is up. So that for those who are into technology, that might be helpful. I think the number one thing is reflection, but I think structure too, if you were used to a structure. If you weren't, then maybe that's not necessary, but if you're used to a 8 to 5 and 12 to 1 lunch, just somehow implement that. And again, it's like creating little things in your home. If you have to put a towel over a sheet over your TV to tell yourself, okay, this is now my workspace. It's just a lot of creativity. But it can be done. So you got to play with it. And again, give yourself some grace. There's going to be some trial and error, figuring out what works for you. But if you kind of journal and reflect, you will be your own expert health coach, or, life coach. If you just journal it, you'll figure out over time, wow, this really worked well today. This did not work well today. Let's not do that again. But this was really great. I really enjoyed that. And you'll figure it out over time.
Any other questions? Let's check the chat. Okay, so if you have a question, now would be the time to ask. You can go ahead and put that in the chat. But while we wait for any final questions to roll in, if there are any, as school is about to start back up, I feel like there's kind of like that rush, even for people who don't have school age children. I kind of feel like everybody's experiencing that.
Yeah.
Do you have any final tips for when life gets a little bit hectic? I feel like there's seasons, like the fall back to school, and then it kind of slows down, and then it's Christmas, and then it kind of slows down.
Mhm.
So in situations like that, or different times of the year, is there anything that you would recommend?
I think the number one thing would just to give yourself some grace, give yourself some forgiveness for feeling hectic or not sticking to that routine that you wanted to, or not being as productive, or whatever it may be that you felt that guilty about that you didn't achieve. Give yourself some grace. When change comes at you, it takes time to adjust. And so you just forgiveness, grace. Yeah.
Thank you. All righty, so that is all that we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I definitely, the one thing I'm going to take away, oh, that's the last question I usually ask.
Sure.
Is if there is one thing that you would hope people take away from this presentation, what would that be?
Okay. Self-reflection and give yourself grace. I think those are the two things I've repeated a bunch of times, which I think that is, if you do that, you'll be golden.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's been a while. I forgot I usually ask that question, but yeah, I liked the give yourself something to look forward to
Yes.
each day. Also, I
Personal
think
meeting. Yep.
awesome. Okay, so if you're like me and you forget that you have questions, or questions come to you later on when you're kind of reflecting back on what you've heard today, you can always email us at healtheducator@thewomensfund.org, and we will work to get your questions answered. I will be sending out a survey link following today's presentation. And we will also have a recording of today's presentation posted to our YouTube within a week. So we can't share the slides with you, but there will be a recording on our YouTube channel where you can view the presentation. Our social media handles. So if you're interested in learning more about the Women's Fund, or following us on social media, those will also be in the email as well. I thought I included them in the slides, but I must have missed that one. So if you look up the Women's Fund Houston on any social media platforms, you can find us. But again, those handles will be in the follow-up email as well. And we thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that you will join us next week as well, or next month as well.